right, well, welcome to another episode of the Alley Report, part of the Service Department. Today we are talking to the illustrious Hall, author of The Hangman Feeds the Jackal, Pantheon of Thieves, and amazing anthology Death's Other Kingdoms. And he's got a new one coming out July 1st, Colossus with a Poison Tongue. And you should pre-order it, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, and also recently has been reading the Amityville Horror sequels books, which I had no idea were a thing.
Yes, which I'm finally eager to talk about those two because my wife has had enough of the Lutz family. So we're going to talk about that and get that off my chest
Amazing.
today.
I'm here for it. So, how involved, so I know that Jay Anson wrote the first one, and then they got
Yeah.
this other guy for the sequels. Like, how involved were the Lutzes in the books at all?
So I'm going to go on like my, when I'm talking about this, I'm going to act like I'm trusting John Jones, the author, right? I'm trusting him completely. So, according to him, now this is chronicled in the third book, but according to him, that he met George Lutz at this party because George Lutz was, and he's, like that's the family in the original things, George and Kathy Lutz. And this was after the book had come out, and I think the movie was about to come out, and he meets George at this party, and people keep asking George, like annoying him in the book about to tell them how bad was it, how bad really, and George just like you do in public, he just went flying off the handle. That's like a natural behavior apparently, but and he just goes irate with this woman and John Jones, this Australian man, which is an important part of the book, by the way, that he's Australian. John Jones comes over and calms him down, and they sit down and they talk for like 3 hours. And George is so relieved to not talk about ghosts, but they talk about manly things like cars and muscles and stuff, and martial arts and all kinds of things like that. And
I still
that
had the
that yeah, that's how. So he's he and George are buddies. That's how connected they are.
and, and I love the idea of because we kind of talked a little bit about this on Twitter, but the way the author talks about himself and the way the author talks about George is just like in this over the top. These are over top masculine men. And it's
George is like this Marine commando, all right, and he is trained in all these different martial arts, and he's like really like in the '80s movies, and like it's not only a physical thing, it's a mental thing. So he's a mental martial artist too, and he's always described in the book, like in a few ways. Like there are these like um, shorthand versions of describing George. And one, he's good looking. All right. In a rugged way. He looks like James Brolin, apparently, according to him. Just disregard the hair, maybe, but he thinks he looks like James Brolin, whom he calls Jim, right? Because he's a buddy. So, he looks like he's a good looking man. Two, he's apparently just gargantuan in size. I don't know, but reading from the books, I get the idea that he's like 6'8", 350 pounds, a
he's
pure
Jack
muscle.
Reacher. He's like he
Yeah.
is a large he's a large man.
It probably disappointing if you would have met him. He'd probably been like, like 5'8" or something. But in the books, like he's like 6'8", and he's this large man. And he's always described, I love this, he's always described as a bear. He's a bear of a man. He has bear strength. Right. So this and he's has a bear's shoulders and bare chest and
It makes me
keepers.
think of those old where Brad Neely redubbed Harry Potter and Ron was Ron the Bear. You know, it'd be like Ron the Bear.
So that's another thing. And then he's a great martial artist. And this comes in handy, really in the third book, because in the third book, the entity that has attacked them in Amityville has become physical. Like apparently the Lutz has like a 7-year curse, and the demon's time is running out, and so it's panicking, and it decides to give up some of its power to become physical. and it's like this giant insectoid thing. But and George actually fights it on a plane in book three, and that was one of the most amazing scenes because they're flying, you know, actually to Australia. I think they're flying to at that point. A lot of the books, again, a lot of the books about Australia for whatever reason, but
Was this that
and
era, like that Crocodile Dundee era, where everyone was obsessed with Australia and America for a minute, and they were like, "We're going to capitalize on this."
he would George would tell you that Crocodile Dundee capitalized on George, right?
Yeah,
He's the one who made Australia popular, but or John Jones did. But this thing attacks him on the plane, and it's like at night, and Kathy's sleeping, and most people are sleeping. The attendants are probably out, and George is going to the restroom, and this thing attacks him. And one woman is awake on the plane, and she watches George like karate chop this thing, and he fights it and actually strangles it. And he feels the life like seeping out of it, and then like disappears back into the abyss. And the woman sees it. And I love it was one of my favorite points in the book because she sees it, and George sees her, and they make eye contact, and he thinks maybe for a second that he'll ask her, "Was that real?" But when he walks up to her, she has like a single tear in her eye, and she's silent, and so he just goes back and sits down.
I just love like they're like the first we need lore for these second books. Like it's a 7 year curse. It can become a physical bug man.
Yeah. Well, the entity now is desperate. So
I just
the book, so that's the third book, and then there's a fourth book called The Evil Escapes, Amityville, The Evil Escapes, which the if you watch the movies, the sequels, there are two movies that are based on the fourth book. There's the one about the lamp. Everybody remembers the lamp one.
see. I've seen that
Uh,
one.
yeah, that's based on book four. And oh, there's one about I think a mirror, maybe it's a mirror. I'm not sure.
Is
Mirror.
that the time travel one? There's like a time
Yes, it's
one.
1992. It's called it's about time.
Yes, yes.
Amityville, it's about time. But I think so. But there's a fourth
And,
book, and then fifth book, and that's the end of the chronicle called Amityville: The Horror Returns.
and at some point, doesn't that Jones guy just drops all pretense and he's like, these are fiction now. Like I'm just abandoning.
I think he kind of oscillates. He goes back and forth because when it suits him, it's fiction. But now, apparently, what you brought to my attention, which I didn't even know this, that he has the Amityville Now book, which is like his journal of being a paranormal investigator.
Yeah, there's a cover of him like dressed as like a priest, and it's like, you're what? You're not a priest. What is
It's
this?
all it's apparently all true again for John Jones. So, George Lutz passed away back in the 2000s. So
Yeah, and
John's on his own now.
yeah, because I saw a documentary with his son, which is the most tragic thing I've ever watched.
I'm
Because
not that yeah, like kind of getting away from being funny. That one's actually disturbing. The what's it called? My Amityville Horror.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's actually about the abuse. What's it? Is it Chris Lutz? I guess as the
yeah, and
kid.
it seemed to me it was like in addition to all the abuse and stuff, like it really seemed like the parents traumatized the hell out of the kids by convincing it that it was real. Like
Right.
they woke up in the night like the demons are here, the ghosts, blah blah blah, and
I
like
know
they're just haunted by that night.
that's something that like really struck me with it that disturbed me too. Is he's talking about this abuse, and he says at the end, you know, he talks about how it's real and these things too, and it's like he's been convinced, you know, that and
Yeah,
it's just a very you can tell it's a bad situation.
yeah, yeah, those poor kids. Because that's one of the things. Like I grew up with. It's a true story, and you would see episodes about it, like In Search of or things like that, and
Yeah,
but they never mentioned like the sequel books. They never mentioned the stuff that would show for sure it's a hoax. They always like, we
yeah,
won't talk. Then you get like older and look into it, it's like, oh, this is very clearly from the get go a hoax,
yeah,
and everyone's in on it except for the kids, and they have thoroughly fucked them up.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean that kind of changed how I looked at it, you know, when I watched that particular documentary. Um, the books though are really they are presented as nonfiction. So
Yeah, no matter how
even
absurd.
though
Yeah,
they're clearly not, but that's how they're presented, that this really happened. Um, and for some reason, John Jones knows what the babysitter was thinking and stuff, at a particular time. Don't ask, right?
yeah.
He took liberties with that, but
Uh,
yeah, and so all the way up to the fifth book, it's presented as nonfiction, which is just crazy.
just amazing. Like, and he got his
Yeah,
check. He's made more money than I have as a writer, I'm sure.
I'm still at it. Yeah, still at it.
Not
Amazingly,
fair, Coy.
I
We
know. Like,
deserve better.
well, it's like all this. The '70s used all this stuff up.
Yeah.
Like all this stuff was like they all got it out of their system in the '70s. So like that was the time
Mhm.
apparently to have hoaxes.
Yeah, because what's the I'm blanking on the names, but like the couple, but investigated The Conjuring, and
Um,
it's killing me
I'll
that I
do.
can't think of them. But yeah, they were investigating Amityville horror, and they investigated a bunch of others. And like I read one of their books way back in the '90s, and it's the same as the Jones one. It's just like this is obviously fiction. You made every word of this up.
Now I have to look up, right?
Yeah, so we got to know. Like that's killing me. But yeah, it's another one where like I feel like the movie is what keeps them alive because I feel like everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, this couple were hoaxing, they were fakes, but
Yeah,
like the
it's
movie version, it's just so
Ed,
enjoyable.
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
And
That
the
was
Warrens, yes, yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah,
Warrens. Yeah. Um, yeah, and they were all over the place. Like when you look back at these cases, they were
yeah,
always they were just like drawn to them.
yeah. They
I
showed
think
up.
there's a documentary I think on Netflix right now. It's like something like "The Devil Made Me Do It," and it's about a exorcism case that they were involved in. Some guy had this kid was like possessed by a demon, and Ed Warren exorcised him. And apparently, the kid's sister's boyfriend said something like, "He's a boy. Take me on. I'm a man. I can take it." And Lorraine Warren's like, and the guy, like 6 months later, or something ends up stabbing this guy to death. The boyfriend ends up stabbing another man to death, and he blames it. He actually took it to court, saying he was possessed by the devil, and the judge threw it out. Like, no.
That's
But
like that's the trouble with like I love all things paranormal and otherworldly. I love the stories, but the second like a real world thing happens, I'm like, okay, but for real though, like
yeah, but
like
like Lorraine Warren was adamant that he actually was possessed when he did the stabbing, and they got some more publicity from that. Um, it's interesting now in that documentary they talk. This family talks looking back, and they don't say that they were faking it or anything. They still believe that the kid was possessed, but they are soured on the Warrens, that the Warrens had promised them money from the book. They had written a book about it, and they ended up getting like $4,000 or something.
yeah,
That
and
was
then
it. And which and apparently the new Conjuring movie is that story. Like, or I don't know how new it is, if it's brand new or not, but The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is like that story.
yeah, it's about the '70s, like and like mentioning In Search Of, like that show from the '70s. I feel like every episode was like presented as if science is in agrees with all this, and we're about to make some big like the Bigfoot one is like, oh yeah, any day now we're gonna prove it, and
I will believe anything that Leonard Nimoy says too. I don't care what he's talking about on there. When he's talking about it, I believe it. And you forget, like at the very beginning of the show, it says we're presenting things that may be true, or but are not
yeah,
possibly true, or something like that. But or no, that are possible explanations, but not the only ones.
yeah,
I think is what it says.
yep.
And then you just forget all that, and you listen to Nimoy talk, and you're like, yeah, yeah, I think we are going to get hit by an ice age in 1992.
Love that episode. I love the coming ice age.
Like, forget global warming. We're in an ice age coming in the '90s. That's the real problem.
Oh yeah, then like Mystery Hill, where it's like, who could have built these 1,000-year-old things? And like you Wikipedia is like, it was this one farmer. We know his name. He did it.
There's a plaque on the side of it. I like there are a lot of I love In Search of. Like I watch and rewatch them. And like the crazier the episode, the better. Like
Yeah,
and I love animal ESP episode. Like, the dogs talk communicating with dogs and stuff. I love it.
yeah. I swear there's one about like plants communicating. Like there's all
Yes,
kinds of
yeah, like, oh, yeah, yeah. Plant
it's called,
ESP.
yeah, it's just anything. They would just take on anything. Like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah, yeah. We'll throw some money
Especially like
behind this.
I mean, especially when it's been on like 7 years, like season seven, they're just right. They don't have any more Bigfoot stories to talk
Yeah.
about. They're really like scraping them together. So it's like that's when you get like the coming ice age and all this,
Hmm.
these like really crackpot theories.
It's like a kind of comparison, like Monster Quest. There's like a podcast called Plastic Plesiosaur Podcast, and they'll cover the Monster Quest episodes. And they covered one which is about a giant shark, and they're like, they made this legend up, like there's a legend of like the Black Demon. Like they invented it for the show. It did not exist before the show. They made it up. And there's a few things where it's like there's just not enough material, and they just made some shit up.
Just yeah, just go with it. That was the podcast did that, or was that In Search of episode? They were
Oh,
talking about an
that was a podcast talking about a Monster Quest one that they had
oh,
just
Monster Quest. Okay,
that
yeah.
they had. It was the same thing. Like they'd run out of stuff, and at one point there's one about a giant shark, and they say there's a legend in this area, and they're like, no, there wasn't. It did not exist before this show. We have looked
Okay,
into it. Like they
okay.
absolutely made every detail of this up.
I was thinking because you got me thinking like there's this In Search of episode that's like the shark gods or something like that.
Yeah,
There's like
it's like,
one like, swimming with the shark gods. I thought maybe it was that. But
oh yeah, because I mean, there's a few in that one too. Like especially because like I love all things paranormal, but the only thing I can't stand is ancient alien stuff.
oh,
So I always
oh
hate those
yeah, okay.
episodes like about the Nazca lines or things like that, and
Hate
it's
it.
always like racism's the root of them all. It really is like,
Yeah, I know. I know that people in this area are just too stupid, right,
yeah,
to be engineers and and it's like what makes me angry about it because I love like Egyptian history and these things and like a pyramid is not a magical shape. I mean, it's just like a
yeah,
simple it's a simple thing, I mean, like human beings can do that. Like aliens are not needed, to make the Great Pyramid. When I'm teaching, that is at least once a year somebody says, "What about ancient aliens?" Huh? Like as a got you moment, and it's just like I can't take it.
yeah,
They'll bring it up when I talk about Stonehenge, and they'll bring it up with pyramids, and
yeah. It's like, how do they move it? Math, like
I think it's
math and
like
manpower. They
it
don't
was
do
like
anything.
arrogant. It's arrogant too to think like
Yeah.
just because we can't figure out exactly how they did it.
Yeah, like the
Yeah,
Egyptians was watching a debunking video, and they're like, "Well, how do we know they move the stones?" Well, there's these hieroglyphics that show how they move the stones. Like,
yeah.
we've known about these
Um,
for centuries.
I think that's something I cannot take. Like I love paranormal stuff. I love those shows, but I cannot stand ancient aliens. I draw
Yeah,
the line.
yeah.
I really
That's me too. That's my red line. It's like, no, no, that and reptilians. Like, I can't. Like,
oh yeah.
it's like
Again,
all our world leaders are reptilians. No, they're just people. People get shitty when you give them money and power. Like, that's the end of it. Like,
that's yeah, you kind of get a conspiracy theories when you think about like the hidden reptiles and stuff. And yeah, I'm not much on that either,
yeah, and
honestly.
it's. I feel like that's a thing where with anything in the paranormal, since you don't have like the proof, and people have to start making assumptions about, well, why haven't we found this? Why hasn't this happened? Oh, well, I'll create an explanation, and very quickly you go into crazy things. Like, I mean, with Bigfoot, like I know people talk about why don't we find their bodies? It's like
Yeah.
the simple explanation is like if they exist, they probably just rot away and we don't find them, or they don't exist. But you'll see people like, well, they buried their dead. What's that based on? Like, or they teleport, or they can be invisible like a predator, or it's like, oh no.
You say think teleporting, it kind of gets me thinking. there's a documentary I love about Bigfoot called Not Your Typical Bigfoot Movie, and it's like 2005, 2006, and it's about two men, Dallas and Wayne, in Portsmouth, Ohio, and they search like Wayne National Forest in Ohio for Bigfoot, and they are really like all their pictures and stuff of Bigfoot are just shadows and stuff like that, like matrix and shadows, uh, but Dallas in there. His theory is that they're like these interdimensional creatures, and that they well, you don't ever see them, or they only have contact when they choose to have contact because they can move in and out of dimensions and stuff. Like
It's like
I
there's
love
a
I,
yeah, there's
I
a book.
recommend this documentary though.
Oh, I'm gonna watch it. Like I need a new one to watch. So I'm gonna watch that one. But there's a book called Where the Footprints In. And it's basically these guys collected every paranormal UFO weird Bigfoot thing, and they talked about how there was like one. It was like one of the main researchers back in the day, and he would always get frustrated when people talk about, well, I saw bright lights or I saw UFOs, and he was like, no, they're just animals. And they said like they were on some location where somebody found tracks, and they follow the trackway, and it goes out to this field and stops in the middle of the field. And they said when he just stared at that where it stopped, he just went, "God damn it!" And he just like stormed off. And like, I just love that moment of like just picturing this researcher like, "Son of a bitch," and just like storming away.
Um, yeah, I love the Bigfoot stuff, but when you talk about like interdimensional things or also alien things, like in that Dallas and Wayne documentary, that's kind of a talking point too, that they're involved with like extraterrestrials.
Yeah,
Dowley has in the documentary this he has this like Native American, so he says, Native American Bigfoot call, which is probably probably not, um but he also has like a Native American alien call.
I just think he probably approached some guy, some random guy, and was like, no, you're Native American, so teach me your secrets. And the guy was like, I'm gonna screw with this guy a little bit, like I'm
I
gonna mess with him a
I
little
have to
bit.
I have to tell you that, so that like this story he actually tells the story of how he got the Native American call, and it was he's 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 the interviewer's like, when did you meet this guy, because he doesn't say his name. He just calls him like he just calls him the Indian or something like that. And he he's like, well, I didn't meet him, it was through email. He emailed the call, and so that was it. So that's how I got it, through email.
I love that. So
Like, how'd you meet him? He's like, I didn't meet him.
yeah, there's just somebody who's like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm gonna have fun with this guy.
he might not exist. Yeah. But yeah, when you go that far, which like going back to the Amityville horror stuff is like, that's what kind of sends it into a tailspin, because when you do watch the first movie or read the first book with Amityville, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say necessarily believable. It's very like a
Yeah,
Hollywood type of haunting, but it's still not as crazy as like as it gets, in the sequels.
yeah. Because for the most part, when people talk about like, oh, I lived in a haunted house and this happened, it's creepy stuff. But if you were like gonna write a book about it or make a movie, it's not enough. Like it's enough in person. It's enough as a campfire tale. It's not enough to get somebody to
Yeah,
pay $20 for a ticket, sit in the seat and watch it.
I know, and that's always like what gets me. Okay, here's what gets me about all this stuff too, that all that stuff kind of stopped happening when people had camera phones.
Yeah. And that is a
Like
very valid, yeah,
people were being thrown across the room apparently, and like walls were bleeding, and like just like oozing like filth and stuff, and I just stopped out.
yeah. Like the
Humans
second
just
you have a
stopped.
camera. Yeah.
Yeah, they just stopped. And I used to listen to this. There was this radio show with Dave Schrader. Do you know that name, Dave Schrader? He's on Ghost Adventures
Oh
sometimes
no,
with
I
like
haven't
Vegas.
listened to that.
But he used to have this radio show in Minnesota. It was like syndicated though, and it was called Darkness Radio. It's not on anymore. But I used to love listening to that. But he would have like a call-in show. It was like coast to coast, kind of,
Yeah, like a
but it
Art
was
Bell.
yeah, it was more based on just on or mostly on paranormal stuff, ghosts, um, and people would have those stories, even in modern times, but they would never have any like photographic evidence. It was always just like word of mouth.
Yeah, I remember one time there was a house in a town that I was born in, and it was supposed to be haunted. And I took a picture of it and developed it, and it looked like there was a face in the window. And I was so excited because I got proof. I got proof of a ghost. So I went out to the house, and the face was right there in the window. And as I got closer, it was like pareidolia. It was just like this plastic wrap that shredded and bent in a way to where it looked like a face from a distance. So I kept
Yeah.
walking up to it. I was like, "Oh, it's still here. It's not moving. Oh man, it's plastic."
Do you like doing stuff like that? Do you like going ghost hunting and things?
I used to. Like I still like to like if there's a place that's haunted. Like when I was younger, when my family had vacations, we would choose like hotels that were haunted. Like, oh, they say this happened here. Like, let's stay here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was fun. When I would start to go with groups of paranormal people, it was like they were too much. Like, I was watching one documentary and they had a guy like they were talking to his ghost hunter and he had like a tactical military vest on, and I was like, there's always
Yeah.
that guy. There's always
Yeah.
tactical vest guy, and he's too much.
Always.
And like
Go ahead.
I had family that lived that house I talked about that lived in it, and things happened, and they had like those paranormal investigators or local were gonna come out and look at the house, and they were just so ridiculous that I swear it like hurt their faith in that it was real. They were like, maybe it was just in our imagination. These people are ridiculous. Like they brought out a psychic, and they're like, this is too much, and like I like had recorded all their accounts, and now they're like. I don't know. Like he like killed it for him. I was like, you experienced these things. You told me these things. They're like, yeah, but those guys, man, that's psychic. I don't know. Maybe it's just all in our heads.
Like that was the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the end of it. That was like, like I don't know. These people are too much. Maybe it's not real.
I used to like doing that. Like I like going to haunted places like at Waverly Hills or Moundsville Penitentiary or Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And I used to like tour, and I still do like touring those places. But when you do like the overnight ghost hunts and there's like 50 people there, and you have
Mhm.
that one guy in the military vest, and so the people with just like serious equipment, like
Yeah,
they've dropped thousands on equipment. Um, and kind of burned out on it when at the height of like the ghost show
yeah,
TV shows and stuff. I was into that, but I kind of burned out on it. I never did experience anything either at those places, so
yeah.
that was disappointing.
Same. I've never gone to a place like. Well, I did one where I went to a house and everybody was seeing stuff. Everybody was experiencing something and freaking out. I'm like, what? Nothing was happening. And it was weird the whole time. I was just standing there, like everybody's like running around, like they've seen this thing. I'm like, nothing's happening. Like, and that was
Were
my
they
like,
ever?
oh, it's all up here. Like that was my like,
Yeah, I think yeah, I do think when you go to those places, it kind of shows you that you can really psych yourself out.
yeah,
You are really primed to hear something or to
yeah,
make shapes out of shadows. When we were at the Moundsville Penitentiary, their main cell block um, goes up like 4 stories or something. I mean, it's like if you're afraid of heights, it's like very high up, right against the ceiling, and it's in summer and it's very hot up there. And you can go in there, and we would go in there and like just sit alone in the dark. And you're so scared, and you want to hear something, and
yeah,
everything you hear, you can make a story out of it or make it into something.
yeah. Especially, did you ever try to do the EMFs? You're gonna catch a voice on a
Yeah,
recorder. And
yeah.
I remember like listening to it, like listening to static for an hour, like a fucking crazy person. And I'm
I
waiting to hear
know,
the
like
voices, but it's like,
there's like 100 hours I'll never get back. Like I
yes,
remember
yeah, I've
I,
done that.
I I was a moron and would like record like 8 hours worth, and I would listen to 8 hours, of
Yeah,
and
and
just
then like, wait, was that
like,
something?
oh,
Like,
did you yeah, rewind a little bit and like, oh no,
and
that
then
was one
anytime
of the other
anybody's like, here's my
50
EMFs.
people.
Yeah, you're like, I guess that's something. I don't. Yeah, no, I did that. And then you feel so cringy because you hear yourself on the recorder, like, hello, are there any spirits here? Please talk to me. It's like, It's like I
Yeah.
should have just done drugs like a normal teenager. Like, what was I doing out there?
Burn these recordings,
Yeah.
please.
Like,
Please.
no, I need to get rid of these before like I die and my kid's phone. It's like, what is this? Why did he do this?
Come in here and listen to this. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I went through that. I had fun doing it, but I really have no interest in doing it now. It's just
Yeah. I've kind of got where it's like I just want the stories. Like I want to hear the stories and go to the place. I don't like
I would
the
like to go to the place during the day.
yeah, and like I see it's
Like and see the stuff. I mean, Moundsville Penitentiary is like this fortress, it's a
yeah,
scary place. It'd be cool to tour it during the day and
yeah,
see
when you
all
can
the
actually see it. And also like I don't know, I'm about to be 40. I can't be up that late. Like like
I,
like 10:30
oh,
is a little much for me these days.
you kidding yourself when you sign up for these, and it's like I would sign up and it would start at like 11 o'clock at night. And you're like, God damn it, no. Like I go to bed at like, like 2 hours before that. So that's like 11 o'clock and you're like drinking coffee and like, I can do this, I can do this. And on adrenaline alone can get you through the first 2 hours. But when you hit like 3 o'clock in the morning, it's like it's over. I
It's like I'm
never
just gonna
always leave early. Like I never made it all the way through.
I feel like I just find a cell and be like, I'm just gonna like close my eyes in the cells. Maybe I'll experience something. Y'all just do your
I
thing.
want to go, yeah, go sleep in the morgue at Waverly Hills, one of those body shoot things. Like,
Yeah, I'll just be in
sleep
here.
in
It's
that
like it's very dark and cold. Prime,
decent,
prime
peaceful,
sleeping environment.
peaceful. And, um, but I did love doing that. I
Yeah,
did
no, I
love
had
that.
fun. I had fun, but it's funny to look back on. It's like, man, just out in the cemetery with like a tape recorder.
I've gotten tired of that, to be honest, too. Like I used to watch those shows, but I've gotten really tired of those shows too. I can't really watch them anymore because it's like something's got to give. Like you have to find something,
Yeah, and then the
something.
second they do, it's like, oh, so you faked that because it's clear, like they faked it. It's like,
And
oh,
yeah,
like I remember Ghost Hunters. It was when they were in a prison and some guy just in a shroud like runs out and it's like you got some poor PA. You went to Spirit Halloween and bought a Grim Reaper costume and like Doug making 7.25 an hour had to run in and out of cells.
yeah, I think there was one on like Ghost Adventures when they would do like the live thing and they had like a Halloween one and a guy like threw his thing and they caught it on camera and had to go back and like apologize and like they kicked the guy off the show, but
It was
still it
like
was clear. Like,
it was like you were like such a scapegoat. Like they're all in it. But they
I
had to
know,
save face.
that guy was like, but that's what we did last week. Like why'd you kick me off this week? Like we did it last week and it was fun. But yeah, I can't do it anymore. I can't.
I hear you. Um, well, man, thank you for coming on here. I appreciate this has been an awesome conversation about the ups and downs of ghost hunting and the Amityville horror.
I do recommend to anyone watching to read the Amityville sequels. Don't believe them, but it's well worth your time
I, I'm
for a good
I'm
laugh.
I'm dying to check them out. And also, you should read The Hangman Feeds the Jackal. That's an awesome Western by and it's genuinely good. Like it's not like any of the horror sequels where it's like trash reading. This is
Thank you.
genuinely good. And
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
yeah,
I don't want it to be compared to John Jones. Not my goal in life.
you
So
never will be, I promise. And Deaths of the Kingdoms, one of my favorite anthologies. And Colossus with the Poison Tongue, which is like some occult horror.
yeah, that's out July 1st. So I'm
Mhm.
very excited about that. I'm gonna get the paperback of that out early too, so those will hopefully arrive on July 1st. So I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, we will have to do this again.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll just do like a Amityville sequel book club. Like
Yeah,
they go on
I'll
and
have to,
on.
update you on the evil escapes as I go through that one. So.
All right, man. Well, it's been awesome.